It's time for good energy, and I'm Dr. Julie, and welcome to Bodyful Day 221. And today we are talking about skin rashes and the senses. We're talking about the kinesthetic sense. This is day 5 of skin rashes and the senses, and today we're going to talk about how skin rashes seem to show up where our joints, where our senses of kinesthetic motion, particularly in our joints, are most powerful. So we'll talk about what you can do to help that and what you can do and why that might be. All right, so let's start with the basics. Take a deep breath in and release. I'm always wondering why that is flopping over there. On this next deep breath in, we're going to expand in the belly, expand in the chest, expand in the sinuses. And as all that happens, because you are so expanded, you will find that you'll rock back just a little bit. Not a lot, but just a little bit. You'll feel maybe your sacrum ease back. And that's actually what's supposed to happen when you breathe. So let's take a deep breath in. And release. And today we are going to breathe into those joints. We're going to breathe into that thin skin in the joints, behind the knees, elbows, armpits, neck. Go ahead and breathe into any skin rashes that you've had settled into there. Take a deep breath in. And release. Now, I have been a skin rash sufferer since I was the age of 6, and I am terrible with that skin crease joint stuff. So remember, our goal through all of this is to find energy to heal your skin equals good energy and minus stressors. And today we're talking about the sense, the kinesthetic sense. And kinesthetic sense is how your body moves through space. Now, the important thing is that when we get that information from, our muscles, we get that information from our joints. There are nerve bundles in our muscles, and there are nerve bundles in our tendons that are next to our joints. And so it is not surprising that when we think about maybe common eczema patterns, those common eczema patterns show up in and around joints. You typically find them in the crooks of arms, you'd find them in the behind the knees, you maybe find them up around the butt, you find them in the armpits, and you can find them up around the neck. All of those are major joint areas. They are major tendon areas, but they're also major muscle areas. So the question is, what is it about joints that make them more susceptible to skin rashes than any other location? Now, part of that has to do with the type of skin that exists around joints. And so when you see people with eczema, most likely they have eczema behind the knee. But in contrast, when you have people with psoriasis, psoriasis usually occurs on the joints, so on the knees, on the elbows, on the finger joints. So whereas eczema usually happens between the joints. And so is there any rhyme or reason? Is there an issue with joint and joint sensation? I'm not necessarily sure. One of the issues could be that there is inflammation in and around the joint capsule. So the joint capsule itself is nervous system embedded, but it surrounds each joint. So your joint has a surrounding of connective tissue, and then there's fluid inside of there. That's where your joint capsule is. It's more likely to do with the type of tissue that is surrounding the joint. So for those with psoriasis, it is already, the dermal layers and epidermal layers are already thick, and then there is overgrowth there in that thickness, which is what leads to the rashes. Whereas those of us with eczema, the skin is thinner on the opposite side of the elbow. And so this is where stuff comes out. It doesn't proliferate, it dries up and ends up getting, well, it doesn't dry up because we put hydrocortisone in there, we dry it even more. But this is where stuff ends up coming out of the body. So whether or not there is a rhyme or reason for it, our kinesthetic sense is definitely going to be messed with when we have a skin rash. For a lot of us, depending upon what type of skin rash we have, they do show up in the joints, in the fingers. For a lot of people, if we think about athlete's foot shows up in between the joints, so that, you know, when you're moving your toes and you spread your toes wide, you end up with cracks. So there's a lot of joint related rash stuff. Now there's also sorts of rashes that appear everywhere else on the body. We can talk about measles, mumps, rubella. They all have different patterns. Some of them are found in the mouth, some of them are found in the body, some of them are found in arms and legs. So there is definitely radical different patterns depending upon what the rash is, but the common ones that stick around with people and cause them the most annoyance are going to be your rosacea, your psoriasis, and your eczema, because they have a sticking point that's very hard to get rid of them. Now, as far as good energy in for those joints, one of the things that we know about those joints is that because they are used, because they have pressure, so if we think about, you know, your elbow, when you squish, you're squishing that rash. If you're resting on your elbow, you're pushing on that overgrowth. A lot of these joints are places where there is sweat building, there is compression of tissues. We think of babies and yeast infections and, you know, the little fat rolls that end up collecting yeast and making them itchy and irritated. And so one of the best things to do with the kinesthetic sense is, and tied to skin rashes, is to try not to try not to wear clothes that are really tight and clinging to the area, because that's going to give you more, it's not going to do with your senses, but it's a kinesthetic sense, but it's going to allow that joint to have more room to move without being constricted. The other thing about that is that if you are wearing clothes that have had have been dried in a soft tissue, fabric softener. Fabric softener itself can be a very strong irritant to the skin, and if you're bending your elbows and sweating and you're wearing those things, you are going to end up with rashes that are contact dermatitis, that is going to end up in those places where you sweat. So one of the things you can do is to try to make sure that your clothes are most airy, most breathable, and that they have less petroleum or less extra products in them. So wash with zero dyes, zero inks, zero perfumes, so that there is less likelihood that when you sweat, you're going to cause an irritation, or you're going to enhance an irritation that is already there. Trying to think. A lot of times we don't want to overstretch that area because we don't want to split the skin. So stretching, which would be our normal thing with kinesthetic movement and moving around, is not exactly on our list of things to do when we have a skin rash, because we don't want to overwork those joints and cause something to rip and cause the weak skin or the overly hard skin to tear or to get bruised. So in that sense, our kinesthetic is not going to give us as much information. We could think of kinesthetic in terms of gut. We've always tied gut to taste, but kinesthetic in terms of gut, you might look at areas that are a little tighter and a little more grumpy than others. That's showing you a kinesthetic or proprioceptive sense of what's going on in there. When you have gut cramping and you have a skin rash, that is usually not a coincidence, not just, you know, it's not just a random coincidence. It's actually something that you should look at. It's an occurrence that signals that if something's not being processed in the gut, and then it will end up showing itself on your arms. So just things to pay attention to kinesthetically, but this is internally, proprioceptively, kinesthetically. I hope that's not too confusing. All right, well, this is the end of kinesthetic sense, and we got 2 more senses left to do. I'm trying to see if we know what it is. Hearing, taste, vestibular, smell, kinesthetic. Obviously, I'm saving touch for one of the last ones. And sight. Yes, we're gonna figure out sight as well. And sight is tied to, of course, what those skin rashes look like and how they make you feel. All right, let's finish it off. Let's take a deep breath in and release. Have a great day, and I'll see you here tomorrow. Take care.